Yep. So we are live right now, and I'll just share my screen once. Yep. So I think we are good. So shall we start, Debashish?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So hi everyone. It's a privilege to have Debashish, who's the cognitive infrastructure leader in the AI MLDL for India South Asia for IBM Systems. And let me tell a bit about Devashish and how we got into contact. So I think the relationship between Devashish and his company with Code Vector Labs and me personally started during this COVID times only, when we got into a very deeper relationship in terms of more professional relationships, where both our companies are right now partners working on several use cases. And I have found Debashish to be like one of the most up-to-date leaders in terms of knowing what is happening around the world in terms of AI, ML, DL, and what are the different applications of artificial intelligence. So I think in this session there will be a lot of good discussions around how the industry is applying AI and ML. And with those opening words, I would also like to introduce Binay Khobragad and Kuldeep Pizda from the AI Champ team, who are the AI Champ leads. They themselves are AI developers. So I welcome all three of you, and most especially I welcome our chief guest, Mr. Debashish Hota. Thank you for taking some time off for this session.
Thanks, Preeti. I would just want to say that what you're doing with the AI Jam session is something that is really interesting and something that people should really look at as a guidance to what. So you are one of the pioneers in some technology aspects with AI that I have worked on,
Hmm.
and people would actually learn with what Code Vector is doing, how they are taking their stuff to industry, what are the
Correct.
industry looking at, right? So you are one of the pioneers who are doing this, and it's really wonderful to be here, talk to you guys on
Great.
this.
Great. Great. So with that, we'll start today's session. So I will request everyone to turn on their videos if it is possible. Please turn on your videos. If it's not, then it's fine. So my first question to you, Debashish, would be sort of a very generic question, and I think you would have answered that many times.
Yeah,
Sometimes I generally ask this question in the end, but
yeah.
with you, I'll start start it in the beginning. Do you think that by 2030 or maybe 2040, AI and robots will take away our jobs? I generally ask this in the end, but with you, I'll ask this
No.
to be the first session, first one. Yeah,
Okay. The,
yeah,
so Priyanjit, no, it's definitely not that. Okay.
okay,
So one of the things that I always say is that AI is not really doing any magic in the industry today, right? It's
right,
more automation and reducing optimization of task. That's
right,
how I would want to put it, right? So that does mean that some of the traditional jobs that we currently do, they
hmm,
might they might be automated to some extent, right?
hmm, hmm,
And some jobs would have to be realigned to something that really needs manual intervention.
correct,
But having
correct,
said so, AI is never 100% accurate, right?
hmm,
Even if we do some projects with very large industries where they are doing some AI project, there are still some requirements for manual interventions wherein domain experts come in, right? And what
hmm,
the other thing I would like to highlight is that AI cannot do anything on its own as of like all of AI that we see today is supervised learning.
hmm,
That's where
hmm,
the domain expertise comes in. So if
hmm,
you are good with your domain, if you understand your business well, if
hmm,
you know how people work in your industry, your job
hmm,
is secure, right? But
okay,
the other part is also true that you need to upskill. You
hmm,
cannot be with the same skill set for 15, 20 years. That's now how
hmm,
the industry works anymore, right?
hmm,
You have to upskill, you have to change your
hmm,
skill set. You have to be updated with what's happening in the industry, and that's how you'll survive.
Hmm. 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 Great. So I think with that, so that would have been actually my last question, but I just wanted to that to be sort of the first question and start with that. So just want to understand, Debashish, from you. Uh, how did you get into this? I think you are an
Uh,
MBA. So how
I'm
did
a,
you get into AI, ML, DL, and in the job role that you are working currently?
See, I would want to say that it was by chance, but it's not really by chance.
Okay.
Uh, I used to be heavily, so I used to be a kind of a solution architect or client technical specialist, as we call it in MBA.
Okay.
What I used to do is I used to prepare the solutions for our customers
Okay.
on some
Mm-hmm.
specific IBM technologies. Right?
Mm-hmm.
So I already had a respectable working knowledge of how technical things are and how it should work.
Mm-hmm.
How I came into AI is okay. So it's an interesting story that at the start of this year, we decided that there is something that we need to do uh, to ensure that our business for the next 4 5 years is secure. Right?
For the next 4 5 years.
Yes, and
And
that's where the entire thing comes into the picture that the industry is moving towards AI. Right? They are
mm,
heavily investing into AI. That's where
mm,
we thought that we need a uh,
mm,
dedicated person on board to actually
mm,
look at how we should work with. And it was very clear to us that it's not going to be a journey where we'll be running alone. We want to have partners
mm,
with us, which is where
mm,
Code Vector comes in. Right?
mm, mm.
So,
So
uh,
just want to understand, this comes from one of the biggest tech companies of the world. So even you guys are thinking what to do 4 to 5 years ahead. So when was the realization that I know this is not a one day kind of a realization, but when was the realization that you guys have to take that plunge and AI itself is the big thing? When was that realization in your organization?
so
Was it 10 years back, 5 years back?
IBM has always been big on AI, right?
Correct,
So if you
correct,
remember Deep Blue, if you remember Deep Blue, right? If you
correct.
remember Watson, right? So
Hmm,
IBM has always been big on AI.
hmm,
Where I specifically come in is on the platform piece of it, right?
hmm,
And what we understood is that the customers, it was okay till the time that the customers were looking at implementing AI as an experiment. But
hmm,
as and when AI becomes a critical component, the
hmm,
infrastructure and the platform plays a big role as well. Right?
hmm,
So that's
hmm,
where our focus as a business unit, systems, which is my business unit, uh,
hmm,
our focus shifted a bit. But
hmm,
overall, IBM has always been big on AI.
hmm,
So
hmm.
uh, it has been a cornerstone of our foundation
Correct,
for years now.
correct. So I'll probably just want to understand from you personally, okay? I know you are working directly with a lot of partners like us, and you are probably the interface between clients and companies like us who work on AI. So, where do you see, where do you see which are the top three industries, if I may ask you so, which are the top three industries that you feel is adopting AI at a very, very rapid rate and probably will disrupt in the next 5 years or 6 years, something like that.
So um, one is definitely BFSI, and BFSI is not something that will adopt AI. It's already doing so.
Correct.
Right? So today, a lot of your large banks are working
Hmm,
on some or the other AI projects, right?
hmm,
Be it NLP, be it sentiment analysis, be it
hmm,
video analytics. Um,
hmm,
all of it is something that the BFSI segment is already really
hmm,
working on, and
hmm.
it will just grow. Right? Today, the
Okay.
largest spender on AI is BFSI.
Okay.
Retail is another one, right? Uh,
Okay.
so a lot retail is a very dynamic business, right? So
Okay.
you have to understand the supply chain. You have to understand where in your next raw material is going to come
Hmm,
in. You have to maintain your working
hmm,
capital. All of it is a hugely dynamic business,
hmm,
and the way that an AI model can actually detect patterns and give
Hmm.
insights, it can be
Hmm.
a worthy companion to have.
Hmm.
Right?
Hmm.
And that's where retail is actually looking at a lot of
Hmm.
AI implementations.
Hmm.
Right? Um, the other manufacturing is still picking up. Right?
Hmm.
There is a lot of stuff that manufacturing can do, but
Hmm.
usually what happens with manufacturing is that their
Hmm.
production is already automated. And a lot
Hmm.
of their production is automated. So
Hmm.
AI, getting an AI solution or getting an AI use case which will actually help them out is really difficult. Right?
Hmm.
Which is where companies like you come in,
Hmm. Hmm.
uh, and they get those very specific use cases for these guys.
Hmm.
A lot of
Hmm.
times, if you go and talk to a business head in a manufacturing
Hmm. Hmm.
company, they might not know how AI will help them. But
Correct.
that's where you come in as the
Hmm.
expert, and you tell them that this is the use case that you'll have, and then you give them an ROI that, yeah, if you do this, this is what the benefit you'll
Then
get. Yeah.
this is done. Right, right. So I'll open it up to Kuldeep and Vinay just after my next question. I'll probably ask them to ask one question each to you. But I think we are getting few questions in terms of what are the future perspectives of your company as its demand and implementation is increasing heavily? So, for example, the demands, I think a lot of it is geopolitical. I'm not allowed to say everything, but I think a lot of geopolitical factors also come into the picture. So, in the next 2, 3 years, what is the focus that you see companies getting into?
So, one is that I cannot speak for my company completely,
Yeah,
right? So,
absolutely. But in
uh,
general, what is the trend that you were saying, trend you
what
were seeing in the industry overall?
yeah, what we see is definitely see the entire AI market is growing at a very rapid pace, right?
Hmm, hmm,
Uh, there are going and the demand is for niche
hmm,
solutions which are plug and play, which has a very short implementation time,
hmm,
right, and which has immediate benefits,
hmm,
right?
hmm,
Uh, which is where when you see a lot of uh,
hmm,
startups like Code Vector have come up and they are doing
hmm,
a great job getting
hmm,
all of those niche
hmm,
use cases in place. Right? And
hmm,
that's the trend that I see, and which is why when I said that we started this
hmm,
partnership program,
hmm,
the idea behind it was the same that there
hmm,
is going to be a lot of use cases wherein which are not uh, which is
hmm,
something that we might not want to build ourselves or the
hmm,
customers might not want to build themselves, but we'll have our partner ecosystem address all of it. And that
hmm,
is going to be the largest chunk of the market in the next
hmm,
few years.
hmm, hmm,
Uh,
hmm, hmm,
today uh, we
hmm,
see, so it was a bit
hmm,
unheard of a few years back, 10, 20, 12
hmm,
years back, where a startup could come and deploy their solution in an
hmm,
enterprise account. Right?
hmm,
The large
hmm,
banks would never go for a solution by a startup. They would always go
hmm,
to some tier one
hmm,
SIs and get the solution from them. But in the
hmm,
last few years, the trend has completely
hmm,
changed, and
hmm,
it's just growing. Right?
hmm,
People are coming out with niche solutions, and they are doing really good.
hmm,
Uh,
hmm,
the other thing that really helps them is that the applications today have become really modular, right?
hmm,
So it's
hmm,
when they have a niche solution, they also have the
hmm,
modular components of those solutions
hmm,
which can be deployed
hmm,
standalone.
hmm,
Right? So if I am doing something with image analysis and
hmm,
detecting
hmm,
signatures, I can
hmm,
use that same API to detect signatures or verify signatures on a check, on a
hmm.
document, on an invoice. All of that can be done, and it's really easy to get those out
Correct.
and implement it in those small places. So that's where the industry is heading. Uh,
Hmm.
the
So
startup
you,
ecosystem is great today.
so I think you see what you primarily mentioned is a lot of things which were not practical maybe 5 years back are now becoming practical, and you see a lot of reusability, something which we
Yes,
also call the transfer learning and stuff like that. So
exactly.
one use case working in one industry and suddenly we
Pick it up.
escalate or pick it up for another industry. That transition
Exactly.
cycle has become very short, so most
Exactly.
industries will be able to switch on. So on
Yes.
that note, I'll probably ask Vinay to ask one related question on it. I think he had some questions. So over to you, Vinay. Vinay, can you hear us? You are on mute. Yeah,
Yeah, am I audible?
yeah, yeah. You are audible, Vinay.
Yeah, when you're allowed it here.
Yeah.
Okay, so my question is very simple. For example, as you said that there are some modules that are being made which can be used in different use cases, right? So, but sometimes what happens is like, pardon me if I'm going a bit technical here, but sometimes what happens is uh, that this whoever builds this AI has no idea where it is going to be used. Sometimes, like many a times happens in our case as well. So what they do is they totally depend on the data.
Hmm.
Um so do you think that like for now, as things are going, as you said, we are right now in a supervised learning and building such an AI which is very possible to make it usable at many different applications is like still long way to go, or maybe if, we can achieve that in couple of years.
So I'll just rephrase Vinay's question if I understood. So we know something there is narrow AI and we know something there is general AI, right?
Yes.
Generalized AI. So
Yes.
do you feel that we have reached a stage? Sorry, Vinay, I'll mute you. There is some noise from your part. Okay.
Okay.
So I think Vinay's question primarily is that uh, have we reached the stage where we are in a generalized AI where we can say that AI can work anything and everything sort of. And sometimes I'll just take one more line to reiterate this question. Sometimes a lot of companies go over the line and try to promote AI as something that a lot of things it's possible, but sometimes it might not be possible. So where do you see companies should be sort of drawing that line in terms of practicality or feasibility?
Okay, so I I don't agree with the fact that AI can do everything under the sun
Okay.
today. And the other, if you look at the other side of the coin, the
Hmm.
industries, the enterprises that are actually implementing AI,
Hmm.
right? Even if you make tall claims,
Hmm.
if you cannot substantiate it,
Hmm.
you won't be able to implement it at their organization. Right? They won't allow that. Uh,
Oh.
you need a very strong statement, a very strong business benefit to show that we will achieve what you want to do.
Hmm.
But having said so, a
Hmm.
lot of the stuff that you do today
Hmm.
forms the cornerstone of what you will do for an industry, right? For example, the signature thing that I mentioned.
Correct.
If you have an API that can actually validate signatures,
Hmm.
you might not have the use case with you currently, but when you go and talk to the customer and get their problem statement and understand what they are actually looking for, right?
Hmm.
It depends on your expertise if you can use your existing APIs to create that custom solution for that customer.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's where your expertise really matters. That's where you
Okay.
stay relevant.
Hmm.
If For example, if the companies or the startups themselves say that no, we are going to be very niche, really
Hmm.
very niche, and do only one product or a couple of
Hmm.
products, that's going to
Hmm.
be really difficult because each business is different and the
Hmm.
way they look at the implementation is different, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So
Hmm. True.
you will have the flexibility, even though you are not an SI who will actually create
Hmm.
the entire custom solution,
Hmm.
but you
Hmm.
have the flexibility to actually use your existing solutions, tweak it a
Hmm.
bit, and make it relevant for the business that you're talking.
Correct, correct. That's a great answer. So I'll request Kuldeep to, maybe if Kuldeep has any question, then Kuldeep can go on.
Yeah, am I audible?
Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, you are.
please.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. Yeah, hi Debashish. So basically, the other day I was reading the book Who Says Elephant Can Dance. Like,
Yeah,
it is a very great book by Lewis. So, like, just read the reformation of IBM that they did in 1993. Like, moving on from system 36 to,
three
like,
six.
the new requirements of the industry. So I think this is the time, like, when AI is, like, very quite buzzword. So
Right.
nowadays, when you got a fresh idea, in a very general, so how did you approach it in terms of AI? When you get an idea to implement in AI, like we can do these things in retail, we can do these things in warehousing and stuff. How do you approach those problems?
Correct.
Okay. So it all starts with listening, right? You have to go and understand what the customer is actually looking for. You're
Mm,
So you are not doing anything for yourself, right? You are not implementing that solution for yourself. You have to understand the customer's business and make sure that they get an ROI. And if you're not sure about it, you have to be mature enough to back up.
mm, mm,
Uh,
mm,
so new things, actually, I don't do a lot of implementations. That's not
mm,
part of what I do. But
mm,
uh, you approach it in the same way when you create a new product, right? Your
mm,
input matters.
mm,
You look
mm,
at the problem and you try and solve a problem.
mm,
If there's no problem that exists, the
mm,
solution, even if you make a great solution, if it solves no problem, right? Even if
mm,
you, let's take the example of Siri, right?
mm,
If Apple had said that Siri will come and have a conversation for you for 2 hours and share
mm,
what they feel, you can share whatever you feel. That's not the that's not what Siri was meant to do, right? It was meant to help you uh, engage with your phone better, use your phone without your hands, right?
mm,
So that's the kind of difference. You have to make sure that whatever the solution that you're working on actually
mm,
solves a problem. If there's no
mm.
real problem that you solve, then it does not make sense. Right? And
Correct.
the new ideas come while brainstorming. They come in various ways while you are trying to solve a problem, but you need the direction first.
Mm, 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 mm. So, a follow-up question. Thanks, Kuldeep. A follow-up question on it. This is what we are doing, trying to do at AI Champ, actually, because since we come most from the industry background of working on AI, what we have found that the gap that exists today is sort of the people who are actually teaching AI. So, when we say AI, that actually comprises of data gathering, data cleaning, data annotation, creation of the AI models, deployment of the AI models, support, and it just doesn't matter if you have a great AI model which cannot be used. Correct.
Yeah,
So as you rightly said, because we interact with so many different clients and they do not care if it's AI or if it's non-AI.
yeah,
What they care about is whether their problem is getting solved or not. So for
exactly.
that, what we have tried to do is we have created with our knowledge base a lot of use cases, sorry, case studies on different use cases. So let's say one of the case studies could be, let's say in retail, some use cases. Like I can probably give on a very neutral fund, let's say counting the number of people who
Right.
are coming into the store and accordingly getting some analytics. So why should an engineer who is a third year or a fourth year old even care about creating a system in which they are counting the number of people? So
Yeah.
unless they know what is the background of it and why this is relevant, I think it doesn't help always. So as engineers, I think we should be having some idea as to why and where this is required.
Okay. So there are two
What are your
things here,
thoughts
two
on that?
approaches here. One is that people are doing something for research. Research is really
Correct,
different from what
correct,
research can consist of anything under the sun. And
correct,
research does not have a set objective. You do have an objective, you do have a
right,
hypothesis that you want to prove. But
correct,
even then, research can take any way that seems fit, right? If you
correct,
are creating a solution for the industry, that's
correct.
where you need to be very clear on what problem you're solving. Okay?
Got
So you have to be uh, you have to understand the difference between research and creating a solution. Research is something that you can do really freely, and
got
it never matters if you succeed or not in research. Even if
in
a failed experiment is still a valid experiment for you, right?
correct.
It did is that it disproved your hypothesis. It's still a valid
Yeah.
experiment. That's not the leeway that you have while you're creating a solution for the industry.
And I think this is one huge gap that we see, that a lot of research is being done, like for example, but not too much work on the industrial AI or the applied AI and stuffs like that. And that is where a lot of the young people, freshers or students, or even let's say for industry people, face some challenge in the transition from doing just on
Yes.
research and to actual deployments.
So I am a huge fan of industry and student interactions, and
Hmm.
so a couple of our partners, just like you do AI Champs, a few of
Hmm.
my other partners as well. What they have actually done is they have gone back to the institutes and
Hmm.
they teach the students, right? And
Correct.
then they are absorbed into the industry.
Hmm. Hmm.
What their belief is, and I
Hmm.
think this should echo across all startups, all organizations, is that
Hmm.
when you when you give back to the student body
Hmm.
or the students, when you teach them something,
Hmm.
they are going to come back to your organization and make you better.
Hmm. Hmm.
Right?
Correct.
So,
Correct.
and it's my personal opinion that what uh, we learn in the engineering institutes
Hmm.
today, uh, we have to focus on research more there because the curriculum is really outdated. Right?
Hmm.
So
True.
that's why a lot of research is being done because that's how the
Hmm.
students learn. If there's no
Correct.
research, then the point of an engineering institute is mute. Right?
Correct.
There's,
Correct.
there's nothing that the folks can do there. So
Correct.
students doing research is really good, but
Hmm.
if you want them to come to the industry and
Hmm.
start running, because there is a deadline in the industry, you have to work within
Exactly.
deadlines. You have to work. You have to make sure that the solution is feasible. That's all
Correct.
is not present in a research environment. Right? So
Correct. Correct.
you have to make sure that the students are ready for it, and that's
Correct.
that's all that we all can do. It won't happen by its own.
Correct, correct. So there's some questions, and I will probably take few questions which we are getting from the audience. So Sumit Ranjan is asking one question, very interesting question. So we know that the hype of AI and the use cases, like we are hearing AI, I think since 2012, 13, like at a very large scale. So, which stage do you think the Indian market is currently in terms of the adoption of AI? It is at a beginning stage, is it at the growth stage, or it is more at a mature stage? It's obviously not at a mature stage for sure,
No, it's not. It's
but
it's
do you
not.
think?
It's. I would rather say it's between the nascent stage and the growth stage, right? So,
Okay,
uh, like I mentioned, that some industries are or some domains are actually ahead in terms of their adoption of AI.
right,
BFSI is one we discussed.
right.
Others are yet to look at a lot of AI solutions, but that's just because a lot of the AI solutions up till now did not have a very good ROI, right? Or we did
Hmm,
not have uh, we did not have a good ROI statement for those products or those solutions.
hmm, hmm,
You have to
hmm.
understand every business is going to invest some money. When
Correct.
there's money involved, they need the
Hmm,
benefit out of it. Let's say you
correct.
go and tell someone that I'll reduce, and this is just a hypothetical
Huh,
situation, wherein you go and tell them that I'll reduce five of your staff members who are doing this job, and
correct.
then you propose a solution which is, let's say, $100 million. It does not
Correct.
make sense. Those five people actually cost less to the industry or to
Exactly.
the
Exactly.
company. So
Exactly.
we did not have that for the longest time, but I
Hmm,
see that happening a lot now. Right?
hmm,
We have a valid ROI statement, and
hmm,
a lot of the credit goes to the open source community as well for it. Right?
hmm.
Because
True. True. True.
in the past few years, we have seen the open source community grow,
Hmm,
and because of these packages coming in, this new uh,
hmm,
packages
hmm,
coming up, it has become really easy, right,
hmm.
to actually create a good ROI or a feasibility for a solution.
Hmm, hmm, hmm. So I think there were few more some questions. So Priyanshi had asked, I think you already answered it, that how is it different in entering the field of research and the field of industry solution? I think you already explained that. So let us do one thing in the next part of this discussion and the last part of the discussion in the next 20 minutes. Let us try to discuss some specifics, okay,
Sure.
which both you and me, maybe what we are engaging on, or maybe I know your capability isn't. So let us talk some specific use cases. We are not talking from a company perspective, but your personal perspective over here, right? and I'll take the hard questions to you. Okay.
Yeah.
So AI has a big issue with data and privacy, right? That is there. So data security, IT security, privacy becomes of paramount importance. Now, as long as the use cases are maybe not something which are very critical, like let's say I'm putting AI for some domains like agriculture or something else which is not related to human beings, I think that security aspect is still constrained, still not so much important. But when we come to use cases like facial recognition, when we come to use cases like retail, where we are trying to analyze people's motions, behaviors, how do you see the gap that a startup or a company can bridge, cross
Mm.
it in terms of the security and privacy aspect? Because I think when you also speak with a lot of your clients, I think
Yeah.
this would be one concern that would come
Uh, that is a very tough question. So,
up. Yeah.
see,
I know this is
uh,
a very tough question.
yeah, it's a very
Yeah.
tough question. And uh,
But is
personally,
it a relevant question? But is it a very
yeah,
relevant?
it's a very relevant question, and we have seen that very recently, right?
Correct.
And I know we have had a discussion about it as well, but
Yeah.
we have seen it really recently that how technology is being used. Uh, so, see, no one who creates these solutions has any wrong intentions, right? It's how you use it.
Correct.
Uh, when it comes to privacy, we have certain laws governing it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And until the companies adhere to all of those laws,
Mm.
I don't think there will be any issue. I don't
Mm.
think there would be any privacy issue. If there's something that goes up, for example, let's take up GDPR. Right?
Mm.
If you are adhering to GDPR, and then you won't have a solution, or you won't be able to make a solution which would actually have that concern. Right?
Mm.
That just GDPR prohibits it. Right?
Mm.
Uh,
Mm.
but still, it's there. I know for a fact that the government of India is also looking at uh, some of these aspects, and they are going
Mm.
to come out with guidelines soon on
Mm.
how AI is to be implemented. Right.
Mm.
So
Mm.
those guidelines are really important, from what I feel.
Mm.
It has to be really sure that there is, when you are actually implementing an AI solution, you take the entire responsibility for it,
Mm.
and we make sure that uh, we are not engaged in any of these products, right? Like the ones that you mentioned. There are
Mm.
some critical aspects there, and you have to be very responsible on how you use it.
Mm. Mm.
You will soon have guidelines around it because AI is still picking up. We did not have very set guidelines around it, but we should
Mm.
have guidelines. We have guidelines within our company. Right?
Mm.
The
Mm.
same thing will happen overall as an industry as well when the government steps in or the regulators step in.
Mm.
So until you adhere to all of those regulations, I don't think there will be an issue.
Correct. And I think I'll touch upon a bit extended question on this. I think the use cases you said about BFSI, right,
Yeah.
as one of the biggest use cases, and we sometimes have seen that, and I think this is how the industry is working right now. The use cases related to images, videos are very difficult in terms of implementation. So if I go into CCTV video analytics, if I go into any kind of video based analytics, the cost of deployment, the cost of server, and so many things comes into the picture. But let's say I just need to analyze some past historic data from some balance sheets and give some predictive analytics on top of it. That is probably a much more practical solution to do.
True.
So 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 do you agree to this fact? Is this something that you have seen personally?
Okay, so it's yes and no. I'll say why no. Uh, because like we have discussed many times that AI is still something that people are looking at as a
Mm.
non-critical.
Mm.
As and when it becomes more critical in their organization, everything else will start making more sense. So, for example, if we go in, you mentioned servers, right? So, if we go and sell
Correct.
some servers for core banking, then the
Mm.
bank is not really worried about the cost. They obviously are, they will negotiate a product, but there are some aspects that are really important.
Mm.
Performance is really important. the security is important, the
mm,
uptime is important. All of that is really important. So the cost takes a backseat there, right?
mm,
And we will start seeing this very soon with AI as well, wherein AI will become really critical. For example, some of your solutions wherein you say that
mm,
you'll do video analytics where social
mm,
distancing and mask compliance are to
mm,
be maintained, right?
mm, mm,
Those solutions are going to become really critical. Now, what
mm,
happens
mm,
if to just to optimize cost or to
mm,
get something at a very cheap, uh,
mm.
not cheap, but at a very lesser price, you
Affordable price.
affordable price, you try and compromise on the entire solution. Wherein, if
Mm,
let's say it fails for a couple of hours, right?
mm,
Who is going to maintain?
mm,
Who is going to monitor all of the people who are walking into your campus, who are wearing mask or not, who are socially distant or not? Who's going to monitor all of it? You cannot afford that 2 hours of downtime, right? And
mm,
you'll have to take additional precautions to avoid that
mm,
2 hours of downtime.
mm,
It
mm,
still has to have a valid ROI. Let me be
mm,
very clear on it. It has to be feasible and it has to have a valid ROI, return on investment for you.
mm,
But the cost will take a backseat. Right?
mm,
It will take a backseat. We have seen that with many critical workloads before in
mm,
the past, and it will start happening with AI as well. As and when it grows, it starts scaling.
mm, mm,
For another example you can take is, let's say you put in a consumer grade GPU, right?
mm,
Uh, it really makes no sense for an enterprise to go for a consumer grade GPU because it's not supported. It might fail anytime. It's not made for 24/7 operation, right?
mm,
And when it fails, what happens? You'll wait for 48 hours to replace it.
mm,
So an
mm.
affordable solution is not always the best solution. Right?
Okay.
So and
Okay.
that's where the enterprises are moving towards, as in how AI is becoming critical to their business.
I'll ask you a very nice question, which is very relevant, and I know you work a lot on it. That is related to auto ML.
Yeah,
Okay. So this question is, I think what will happen in the future is maybe 10 years down the line where we won't need to code, right? So we are going to somewhere around a codeless with the GPT-3 and everything. Elon Musk will definitely do a lot of stuff. But
yeah,
if I look at a very short term in the next 3 to 5 years, and where a lot of these stuff can be created by auto ML
yeah.
also. So can you touch upon few areas irrespective of your organization where you think auto ML would become very critical, or do you think auto ML is not critical?
Auto ML is really critical. But I would just want to highlight this fact when you said that you won't have to code. Right? So when I was doing my engineering, we used to make websites. Right? We used to make
Right,
websites, and
right.
something that was really popular back then, and it should be now as well. I've
Mm,
left that field a long time
mm,
back. But there
mm.
there were content management systems, your
Correct.
Joomla,
CMS.
yeah, the WordPress, and all of those.
Mm,
So
mm,
when we first had our exposures to these CMS. We thought
mm,
we don't have to code while making a
mm,
website. We'll not have to code. Everything will be managed by the CMS.
mm.
But that's not true. Right?
That was not
Uh,
true.
that's not true. If you create a website using WordPress alone or Joomla alone,
Mm.
that's going to be a very slow website. I can tell
Correct,
you this, right? You have to
correct,
do your optimizations. You have to do that, and you have to understand that technology a bit. The same is true for AutoML as well. While
correct.
AutoML is really critical, it's
Mm.
really critical today is because a lot of organizations do not have a dedicated data science team,
Correct,
right?
correct,
But they have domain expertise. Now,
correct.
how do we enable those domain experts to create an AI model and experiment with it? Right? That's
Exactly.
where AutoML comes into the picture, and that's going to help a lot. Let's take an example. If you are analyzing chest X-rays, right? If you're
Correct.
analyzing chest X-rays for to find out, so I don't know if you know this or not, but when you take an X-ray, and
Mm,
I'm not the medical profession, so I might
mm,
not be correct on this, but when you take
mm,
a chest X-ray, you can actually find out if a person is suffering from COVID or not. Right? You can find out between those two
mm,
X-rays.
mm,
Now, if that is something that we won't have the knowledge about, right? We won't
mm,
understand the X-ray, but the
mm,
doctor will. Now, how do
mm,
we enable the doctor to actually form an AI model? He does not have to go and look at all the X-rays. He can actually create an AI model to work on it.
mm,
That's where these auto DL and auto ML platforms come into the
mm,
picture. That
mm,
doctors can actually use this, create an AI model just like it.
mm,
We have this, and we have an auto DL tool for image analysis, and I
mm,
can work on that tool. Right?
mm,
I work on that tool, and I'm not technical guy. I don't code,
mm, mm.
so that
So
that's
in
where it becomes really important.
so in future, you also see that I think where we are taking this conversation is that you need to obviously have technology background. I think more than coding, what will be very relevant for somebody in the future is to understand how technology workflows happen. So even if you were a doctor and you don't know probably how to code, but at least you should have that level of knowledge where you can use certain tools.
Yeah, so the training on tools is important. And
Exactly.
see, and whosoever has done coding in the past can attest to this fact that it's 90% it's just the logic, right?
Exactly.
Uh,
It's a
Everything
logical.
else, yeah. If you understand the logic, even
Hmm.
if you don't know the syntax, you can actually go on Stack Overflow and find out the code and write a small code
Correct.
there.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. Correct.
It's the logic that matters. Anyone who understands the logic can actually use a ML platform or a DL platform.
Correct, correct, correct. I think my last couple of questions would be my second last question would be that what would be your advice to a lot of people who wants to come into this industry? I think that is a very relevant thing. So if you can give a structural way, maybe step one, step two, step three for somebody, it does not need to be coding as such. But let's say I'll give my story first and then I'll ask you. So I never knew what is AI, I think till early 2019. But I had a bunch of friends, or late 2018, and I had a bunch of friends who knew a lot of the coding aspects. But how I did was I read a lot. I read a lot on Medium. I saw a lot of videos, and slowly and steadily, I got to know a lot of the business use cases. And then once we claim that we are in this domain of AI services, working as a service for a lot of clients, we got a lot of queries. And I think
Yeah,
my biggest feature is my clients
yeah,
in terms of what is happening in the industry for AI. Now, I know it's not possible for a lot of people to take this route and get into this domain. But what could be a logical flow for somebody who wants to get into the industrial AI aspect? Let's say somebody who's in his third year or fourth
yeah.
year, something like that.
So, okay. So, assuming that the institutes are not actually coming out with some AI courses, which I know for a fact that a lot of institutes are doing that, right?
Correct.
So, they would have their AI courses, some attested by industries, some attested by tech companies like
Mm,
IBM.
mm,
And those courses will actually help you gain a foothold in these.
mm, mm.
But other than that, what would really help you is what you mentioned really correctly. Like it's curiosity. You need
Correct.
to you need to take that plunge and say that yeah, this is something that I want to do, and I
Mm,
want to learn more about it. And you will find the sources. Right?
mm,
A
mm,
few months back, Udemy was offering courses for 450 rupees. They might still do. Right?
mm,
And those
mm,
are really good courses,
mm,
exhaustive courses.
mm,
You can look at those courses. I'll share a
mm,
couple of links with you, which I went through, and
mm,
those courses are really good.
mm,
There are industry courses that you will get. There are
mm,
courses by IBM, Microsoft, AWS, all of
mm.
that. If those would be really important if you want to be an expert, a technology expert. Right?
Correct.
Let's say if you want to be an AWS specialist, there are
Mm,
certifications for it.
mm, mm,
If you want to be, let's say, a client architect, right? There are
mm,
certifications for it. You need to find out those, and your industry connects will help you. You reach out to
mm,
anyone, you drop me a message on LinkedIn,
mm,
you drop a message to PhD, I'm sure we will reply
mm,
back to you. Those industry connects will really help you. While technically I might not be able to guide the folks
mm.
here, but the only thing is that you need to be open to learning new things there, right?
And
And
what role do you think a community plays? Because a lot of the things that we are trying to AI champ
yeah,
is to provide a community to young people or freshers, a technology community, and probably will extend it to some other areas as
it's
well.
it's huge. It's huge. So it's not only at our level. It's at the enterprise level as well. So Uh,
Okay.
IBM actually was a part of something known as the Open Power Foundation back in 2013. It was
Okay.
based on something really similar, right? We started that Open Power Foundation with five other companies: Google, Mellanox, Sky, and Nvidia. And now it has grown to over 230 odd companies, like 200 odd companies. I'm not sure about the numbers, but it's really big. So the entire point of that Open Power Foundation is to become a community,
Hmm.
exchange expertise, and take the
Hmm.
entire technology world forward.
Correct.
Right? That's how the
Correct.
community works. So you learn
Hmm.
something from someone, and you
Hmm.
teach them something. That's
Hmm.
how it works. Stack Overflow, I used to use a lot of Stack Overflow back in the days when I was
Hmm.
doing engineering. So
Hmm.
that community actually helped me get better at a lot more stuff.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
the community plays a really important role, and something that what you are doing with AI jams
Hmm.
is really important for people who are looking for guidance on how to move forward.
Hmm. Hmm. So I think I'll just wrap whatever we discussed so that we can just have a quick overview of what this discussion was, and then we'll take the closing comments. So I think we started off with the discussions about startups being a bit flexible in terms of their use cases, though niche is the area to start off with, but still you have to be flexible and open to a couple of industries where you can look at, so you cannot be very very fixated. And then I think we discussed about the valid ROI. So every AI solution is not a solution which can be implemented or which can be deployed, right? So from a client or business perspective, I think ROI is very, very important. And I think then you very nicely elaborated and discussed about the difference between what is research and what is industry solutions. And you also mentioned about that both the things are good to have, but research based research work will focus only on the research aspects, whereas industrial AI would be different. And
Yes.
then we touched upon how the application of, how the implementation cycle of AI is happening in India. And you mentioned somewhere between, the beginning stage and somewhere in between. And you also said how the government is coming up with various guidelines for the deployment. And then I think we touched upon a bit about the AutoML aspect. And you very nicely mentioned about how in the future we will see a lot of doctors maybe creating
Yeah.
their own AI models, or a lot of professionals
Yes.
who do not have practical hands-on experience create that. And I think the last aspect you touched upon is what is the important of a technology coming, something which we are trying to create at AI Champ. So our belief at AI Champ is, and something which I also learned in IM, and I'm pretty sure you also learned in your B school, the peer-to-peer learning is
Yeah.
something that takes you a long way. So what we have done in AI Champ is we took a screening test. So we got, I think, 400 plus entries for
Yeah.
the application part, and we divided into three parts, which is master, intermediate, and beginner, depending
Uh-huh.
upon the levels of skills which they showed
Yeah.
during the screening test. And our objective is to create this responsibility matrix where the master helps the intermediate helps the beginner in a community,
Yeah.
and they are sort of responsible for helping
Yeah.
each other. So
That's a great idea. That's really how the way it should be.
exactly, exactly. So this we have also understood over the last couple of years that we are spending, because I think what motivated us to start this was, when we used to go for internships, we used to see so many applications, but hardly anybody having any hands-on. So that motivated us to start this. So any closing comments for any? So this was a question that was asked to me a couple of days back. That
Yeah.
what would be your advice to a 20-year-old? So, what would be your advice to a 20-year-old technology enthusiast? This
Yeah,
will be the last.
just have fun. At 20 years old, uh, you are really experimenting with what you really want to do. So you have to find out what you will do in the next 5 years. Just have fun in the various stuff that you do. A lot of folks that we knew during our college days were working on technology not because they wanted to, they had to. Right? And that's not the way it should be. You need to understand that you will grow only when you like what you do. Yeah. So have fun. You find out within AI there are various uh,
Correct.
domains. Within AI there are various domains. So you don't take AI as an entire thing. You try and
Exactly.
develop an expertise in a particular domain. Uh, if you like image analysis, you work on image analysis. If you understand NLP better, you work on sentiment analysis. You will gradually learn about the other stuff when you are working. You'll work and experience it. But when you want to start off, you can actually look at some specific stuff and start working on it and feel if you are really enjoying it or not. Right? If you really like what you do, I think you, no matter what happens, you will actually find your way out.
Correct. Correct. So that was some great closing comments that we should experiment,
Yeah.
and I think we are all experimenting somewhere or the
Everyone is. We are
industry.
experimenting every day. Every day we are doing something new. So
Yeah,
uh, even personally or as an organization, everyone's experimenting.
correct,
Right?
correct,
That's
correct.
how if you don't take the plunge, there's nowhere that you'll succeed.
Correct, absolutely. So thanks a lot, Debashish. It was a really amazing session, and I'm pretty sure the folks who joined it would have really benefited from this. And I'm looking forward to hosting you again for more future sessions. Thanks a lot.
Definitely, Priyanjit. Thank you very much. It was a fun
Thanks
session.
a lot. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Debashish. Thanks a lot to everyone who has joined. Thanks a lot.